implications for lifelong learning. It is my honor to moderate this absolutely timely discussion. Earlier this morning, we have already heard technology, the use of technology, the changes resulting from technology developments repeatedly echoed by the ministers, our Assistant Director General, Ms. Stefania Giannini, as well as the speakers in Plenary 1. I have the honor to actually welcome the speakers for my session onto the stage. So starting from the left of this screen, Professor Hyo-Jeong So, professor at Ewha Womans University, Republic of Korea. Please, Professor So. A warm round of applause for her, please. Thank you very much. And next, all of you should be very familiar with our honorable guest, Ibu Denni Puspa Purbasari, Executive Director, PMO Kartu Prakerja, Indonesia. And Ibu Vivi Alatas, a Senior Advisor to Prospera, which you heard from in Plenary 1 already as well. Please welcome her. We also have the honor of an online speaker joining from India, Mr. Basheerhamad Shadrach, who is the Director of the Commonwealth Educational Media Center for Asia as part of the Commonwealth of Learning organization, and he's joining us from New Delhi, India. So welcome, Director Shadrach. So before we start, perhaps I can just set maybe the context. I think it's clear for us that we are at an inflection point. The first most important point, I think, is that we are past the halfway stage of the Sustainable Development Goals number 4 overall, but specifically number 4 on education, quality, and inclusive lifelong learning. And secondly, that the development of artificial intelligence have clearly overtaken the text of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals that were enacted in 2015. We see that generative AI is a very hot topic now. It's the elephant in the room that we can't really avoid. And it's likely to dramatically change the volume, quality of media and information, as well as the possibilities for learning and creation. As we already recognized in the earlier sessions, there's also existing inequalities that may become greater or exacerbated by artificial intelligence, the use of big data to develop technological tools and platforms. So we should also constantly bear in mind that the digital divide is real, and it affects, for example, as Mr. Daniel Nello mentioned earlier, it affects a lady, maybe in her, who just graduated from high school, living in eastern Indonesia, maybe living in a small town, who has limited access or has to navigate figuring out how to create a life for herself. So in this context, this plenary aims to discuss technology's contribution to existing inequalities. We will not shy away from that, but also understand how it has contributed to progress towards more inclusive and equitable lifelong learning. We'll also look at innovative approaches at both from research perspective, from the national and international perspective, to bridge digital divides relating to access, content, platforms, and educators' capacities. And lastly, the very important aspect of how to explore effective partnerships to accelerate local, national, and international goals within the Marrakesh Framework for Action, but also the broader Sustainable Development Goal agenda. So without further ado, I will now invite Professor So, please, to provide her perspective as a very experienced and long experienced academic who's worked with UIL, worked with UNESCO and private organizations, and of course her university for many decades, to talk about the role of emerging technology for adult learning and education. Professor So, please.
Yeah, thank you, Jian, for the introduction. Can I see the slide, please? Yeah. Okay, so my presentation focused on the role of emerging technologies for adult learning and education, and possibilities and challenges. So recently we have witnessed the rise of intelligent data-driven movement in education. And this slide is taken from this year's Horizon report, which describes the key trends of teaching and learning with technology. There are 6 themes identified by the report, and then as you can see, AI is the main theme that the report identified. And then you can see generative AI and also high flex learning is the combination of hybrid learning and flexible learning and micro-credentials. So obviously AI is one of the main themes happening in educational sector. So it is not very surprising to see many learning applications and platforms that claim to integrate AI in their design. For example, this is a Santa Toy. This is one of the widely used mobile applications in South Korea. And this application claims that you invest like 20 hours and that you can increase more than 160 points in your topic test. So you'll be very tempting to buy this kind of AI integrated application. So my presentation focused on the research that I conducted when I was with UIL as a visiting scholar. And it's going to appear as a report. You can see the title of the report here, and that I believe this will be published later this year. In this report, I look at the potential of emerging technology for adult learning and education, and focusing on 3 types of emerging technologies: AI and XR. XR indicate extended reality, such as AI, VR, AR, VR, and metaverse, and the blockchain. Of course, there are many types of emerging technologies, but I've just focused on these 3 technologies because it is a fast-growing technology with a great potential to impact adult learning and education. The way I look at the potential of these 3 types of emerging technology is through the method of systematic literature review. This is to review what is known in the academic discourse. So this research was conducted last year, and I looked at over 100 articles published from 2018. And my focus was on 2 parts. The first part is what is the research trend, academic research trend, about applying this kind of emerging technologies for adult learning and education. And the second part look at what are the opportunities and challenges associated with this each type of technology. And this is the methodology I went through to identify these questions. So we started over 600 articles, and through the screening process, many of the articles were removed, and then finally we identified 102 articles. Okay, so there are 2 parts that I want to emphasize. The first part is going to be very brief. It's going to give you the overall trend, the research trend happening in the academic research. So the first one is a publication year. So general is an upward trend, meaning that there are more research articles on this issue has been published. Research type is just looking at what is the research paper, whether it has empirical evidence or it's just a design and development article. So for example, like a blockchain research is mainly design and development without empirical evidence. Whereas AI or XR research had some empirical evidence published. perhaps number 3 is very relevant to the theme of this conference, like a target learner group. As you can see, most of the research articles focus on adult learners, such as university students, and less focus on learners with disabilities or marginalized groups. Looking at the learning space, most articles, for example, blockchain focus on formal education, whereas XR research is more diverse, coming from informal learning and Tibet as well. Okay, countries, authors affiliation. So what is the country very active in this kind of research? You can guess. So I will just present AI and blockchain here. So top 3 countries published, most of the article was China, USA, and UK. And same pattern was observed in the blockchain research as well. So it kind of confirmed our assumption that China has been very active in this area of research. The second part of my research is looking at the opportunities and challenges associated with each type of technology. So I'm not going into the details of this table because it's going to be published in the report. I will only focus on artificial intelligence for today's presentation. The first one is AI, using AI for recommending resources for personalized learning. One of the very promising areas for using AI is to recommend relevant resources to learners. So we have witnessed the rise of OER, the open educational resources out there in various languages and various platforms. But the problem with OER is that they are there, but in different formats. From learners' perspective, more is not necessarily better because they tend to have difficulty in choosing what is best for them. So they tend to follow recommendations. So I'd like to introduce one project conducted in EU. This project is very interesting because they attempt to build a network of OER, connecting different OER resources in different formats and languages and platforms. And another aspect I really like about this project is their recommendation mechanism. And the mechanism is called TrueLearn. So how they recommend the resources is that they calculate some kind of indexes based on your prior knowledge, your interest level, and also your curiosity as well. And they recommend resources with novelty. That means you are not going back to the resources that you are exposed, but you tend to get some new resources with some novelty effect. So what is the challenge of AI? The first very important challenge is it's very difficult to develop meaningful lifelong learner models. It's a technical challenge. So if you look at this figure, our lifetime span, but so far the AI applications or any kind of intelligent application focus on only certain stage of our life. We haven't really seen any applications that cover learning data coming from like our lifetime journey. Also, there's ethical issue involved that the learner may opt out from data collection. So with that, I'd like to introduce this framework proposed by Chinese scholars, 3 paradigms of AI in education. So this scholar suggests that there are 3 paradigms in AI. Okay. It's supposed to appear here, the box. Okay, so I will just explain it. There are 3 paradigms in AI-AD. And the first paradigm is like AI is directing. That means we use AI to just deliver the content. The second paradigm is like AI as a collaborator. So we use AI as a collaborative, for collaborative learning. And the third is AI as empowered. That means AI is empowering learners. So what is interesting about the three paradigm is that it kind of mirrored the development of learning theories, such as from behaviorism to cognitivism, and also constructivism and connectivism as well. But as I mentioned briefly earlier, many of the AI applications so far, at least for this research, I found that it follows the learning logic of paradigm 1. That means delivering learning content. So I didn't really identify many applications that follow the learning mechanism of paradigm 2 or 3, that is empowering learners. Also, I'd like to mention that AI so far has been very powerful to tell us what we know, but it is less powerful when it comes to question why we learn or how we learn. So although this research was conducted before the release of ChatGPT-I, I'd like to mention briefly about the potential of generative AI and the creative work. So we can ask this question, whether generative AI can support learning design within paradigm 2 and 3, which I say the current research is lacking. With that, I would like to focus on creativity. So human creativity has been regarded as a unique human trait. But so therefore, in the job market, someone with a creativity has been highly regarded. But with the emergence of generative AI, such as ChatGPT, do you think creative work can be replaced by this type of intelligent technology? In fact, when I prepared this slide, I asked ChatGPT-I, can you guess what is his answer or her answer? Oh, of course, yes. So that was the answer I got from ChatGPT. All right. But one thing I want to emphasize is that it's becoming important that you need to ask good questions, which is called prompt engineering in generative AI. Asking good questions becomes more important than finding answers or solutions. So with that, I'd like to also share this very insightful article published in the recent issue of Harvard Business Review. So this article argued that the potential of generative AI is not to replace humans' creativity, but it's about using it to augment our creativity. And there are many ways that we can use generative AI, such as promoting divergent thinking, or challenging our expertise bias, or evaluating our ideas. This is the way that we can use generative AI. Of course, I think it is a bit too early to say whether generative AI can augment human creativity or replace creative work. I think it has a good potential. This is my last slide, which I summarize the key points from my research and also the questions for discussion, such as learner agency, or also using emerging technology for equitable, inclusive learning, and the need for forming interdisciplinary research teams, and also educating and influencing decision makers for the system-wide adoption. Okay. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor So. I hope you all can hear me clearly. Okay, yes. Fantastic. I will provide a summary or some thoughts at the end of the 4 presentations. So I will actually give the floor now to Ibu Denni Puspa Purbasari to share an in-depth sort of deep dive into what Kartu Prakerja is, because we've actually heard a lot about it from different speakers, and now she will have the honor of sharing, and we'll have the privilege of listening to what exactly Kartu Prakerja is about. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. All right, thank you so much. I would like to explain about Prakerja and how it is relevant for the policy making and also to form partnership. So, Kartu Prakerja, the title of my presentation, A Breakthrough for Lifelong Learning. So, what we are facing? So, the world, all of us face the pandemic. Not only that, we also face a lot of disruptions that come from climate change, and then technological change, and so on. So disruptions disproportionately impacted more to the vulnerable groups. So we recognize that not all members in our society able to adapt with speed and capacity that we hope for. And then what happened here is that for the people who are unable to adapt, they become jobless. So in Indonesia, in 2019, the number or the percentage of youth that are not in education, not in training, and also not in employment reached 20.5%. And then the GDP per capita in Indonesia is about 4,000. Youth unemployment in 2019, so 2019 is actually the beginning of Prakerja when policy making is made. So youth unemployment is 6 times higher than the adult unemployment. The reason is because fresh graduates does not have experience, while the major job openings require at least, in general, 1 year experience. So that's why unemployment is very high for the youth. And interestingly, Statistic Indonesia recorded that 90% of Indonesian workforce never attended any trainings before. So they only have certificates from formal education. And this number equivalent to 120 million people. So again, we need to understand the context where actually the policy is supporting. Because international policy and programs provides us with principles, provide us with approach, and also give us framework of thinking. But in order to make the policy relevant and work on the ground, we must adapt, we must contextualize it. So the main reason why many Indonesian workforce did not take any trainings, because number one, research found that the reason, I don't have money. Number two, I don't have time. Number three, I don't know what trainings I should take. So with this situation, government must step in because there is market failure. That's the terminology of economists use. And what is interesting also, statistic and research surveys show that not many Indonesian corporations invested in skills and training for their employees. Why? Because they do not know the value of giving the trainings, the monetary value. The second thing is that they are afraid if they are hijacked by other companies after they are investing. So, Prakerja come in the market in order to support the achievement, Indonesia to achieve Vision 2045, 100 years of Indonesia. So we have aspiration to be high income country that is measured by GNI per capita. Economics told us that in order to have higher income per capita, you have to make sure, number one, the number of labor increased. Number two, those who work, the productivity should be increased. So for the number of labor here, like David Naylor mentioned in the morning, we have low-hanging fruit, namely female workers. So in Indonesia, labor force participation rate for women is only 54%. Even though the education achievement for women at school the same as men, but the number of participation is low. There are many reasons for this. But Prakerja actually can give access for women to participate in labor market while they are at home. The second thing is that we have to do better matching for the demand and supply for labor. And then the second part on the productivity of labor, we must provide access for reskilling and upskilling for everyone, such that their productivity can be maintained or even increased. And the last one, we have to do matching supply and demand for trainings. How we actually can connect the trainers or training providers with the labor. So Prakerja actually serve them all. How Prakerja do that? Well, because in a policy making, we involve all the stakeholders. I remember at that time, after the presidential campaign, and then President Joko Widodo won the election in May 2019, it took at least 8 months to do this thing, stakeholder consultations. We invited everyone, more than 100 FGDs. At that time, I was the economic deputy of the executive office of the president. So we have to make sure that the initiative is right, the policy design is right, what kind of goal that we want to achieve. We cannot basically serve all the goals. We must decide what main goals that we want to achieve, and then involve everyone. And then what kind of regulation that actually strong enough as a foundation of this program. So Prakerja, the foundational regulation is presidential decree. It's the same like Oman, the king decree or the royal decree. And then after we have the policy design and then the output is the legal infrastructure, then what is exactly Prakerja? So Prakerja is a demand-driven skill development program. We have connection or integration with job portals such that we can see what jobs in demand and what skills required. And then from that, we pull as an input information what kind of training providers or what kind of training needs to be prioritized or invited. And then we basically create some incentive, because again, the problem of workers in Indonesia do not want to invest for training. Number one is money. So the training in Prakerja essentially is a scholarship. Everybody is given certain amount or credit in order to purchase any trainings in the platform. The second problem of the workers is they basically do not have time. That's why we provide online and offline training such that people basically can have some flexibility to enjoy and study. And then the third problem is asymmetric information. That's why connecting the supply and demand in one platform on their palm is very important. So this is actually different kind of trainings, soft skill, hard skill, financial literacy, and also on the basically healthy lifestyle. So again, people respond to incentive. That's a principle in economics. So in order to make sure learning is happening and people actually reach the finish line of the training, we give incentive at the end, namely cash incentive. And the cash incentive will be transferred directly from the treasury to the wallet or bank account of the recipient. And then, so Prakerja essentially is different from the old style of delivering courses. Prakerja gives choice and voice for the training participants. So the left one is Prakerja scheme. From the state budget directly to the participant, and participant can buy any trainings that they need in the ecosystem. And then the old system is actually from the state budget go to line ministries and then go to the government training institutes, and then basically participants come for free. As you see here, the right one has more limitation on choices. And then how we connect training to vacancies seamlessly. So this is actually the look of Prakerja. You can actually Google it, Prakerja, and then at the top using, of course, SEO, then you can click. It is available in English. So thank you for Pak Hengki for make sure that English version is available, because you are in Indonesia. Geographical location Indonesia, it will be in Indonesian. That's why we have the English one. But if you access it outside, outside Indonesia, then it will be directly in English. So this is basically the look of Prakerja. It is very user friendly. It is not stiff and cold like how actually government engaging or build their websites. So it is user-friendly, it is on-demand registration, so everybody even now can register in Prakerja. So it is open 24/7, and then after that, we basically give the recommendation that fit to the profile of the registrants using machine learning. And then there is no physical card, so there is a unique numbers. That's actually the credit numbers of Prakerja. So it is unique for each recipient. And then at the end, you can see job that is basically require your the skill that you just completed. Like for example, if one platform, the job require Adobe Photoshop, then any job with any job openings basically will come to the recipient that already completed Adobe Photoshop trainings. And then this is actually the ecosystem of Prakerja. So I am entering the second part, namely the issue of partnership. Government cannot do everything alone. Because Indonesia is a big country, we know that a lot of initiatives out there in the market, not only in Indonesia, but also in the international market. So we have to build partnership with them. Government should not do everything, building everything from zero. So here we have collaboration with job portals, marketplace, training providers, and 99% of them are private sectors. So we use their capabilities, we use their excellence in order to serve and bring values to the society. So what is the role of government in Prakerja? As a coordinator. Because the market actually, there is a coordination failure. So we have to basically open up our arms, identify, and then make sure that there is a fair and transparent processes in order to enter the ecosystem. And then, how actually Prakerja support lifelong learning. So lifelong learning, we are born 0 years, and then, well, this is the life expectancy of female Indonesians, 77 years old. So during that span, of course, the formal education from preschool to university, 2 years old to 22 years old, and then Prakerja served from 18 to 64. And then we know there is a lifelong learning that is basically spanned from 0 to 77, and adult learning and education is from 18 because that's the law. What so-called adult is 18 years old to 77, of course, to the end. So again, Prakerja provides all this kind of training. So Prakerja essentially is continuation, a complement of the output of the traditional, education. And then this is the results of Prakerja. So Prakerja scalability, before Prakerja, like I said before, only there are 90% of Indonesian workforce never attended trainings. After 3 years of implementation, it becomes doubled. So meaning like reduced from 10% to 20%, those who ever attended trainings. Now the orange, as you see, even though Prakerja really fast, but the orange very big. Like I said before, the homework is 120 million people. And research done by many agencies actually show positive impact, promising impact. Of course, we are looking toward improvement over time. And what is interesting is that research by JPAL, one of the researchers is actually Ibu Vivi, showed that using the survey data back in 2021, showed that Prakerja actually increased opportunities to get a new job for 18%. And then increase the income per month by 10% compared to the non-recipient. So this one used the RCT method to compare the participant and the non-participant. And what is interesting is that the increase in income equivalent to 122,500 rupiah. This is very small, it's like $10. But it is equivalent to 4.2% increase in the average salary of Indonesian blue-collar workers. It is equivalent to 61% of food voucher that is monthly given to the poor. So essentially, we invite Indonesian workers to be independent and then to have dignity and then to be optimistic. Because I believe that the way to get prosperity that is sustainable is through work and, of course, through education. And then this is the span of Prakerja. So I have been in the eastern island of Papua and also eastern island of Sumatra. So it's a very big region, but you see, infrastructure of digital comes, of course, keep improving, but Prakerja showed that in a very short period, people in Papua, there are 55,000 people takes Prakerja. So there is no intermediaries whatsoever, local elites and then, government bureaucracy. People can go to their gadget and then register to Prakerja. And then if we found that the number of subscribers or registrants more than the quota, we randomize with weights. So we try to be fair and transparent in doing the program. And then how inclusive Prakerja is. So Prakerja cover all the districts in Indonesia. 12% of participants 50 years old and above. They are actually in a position or in the situation towards pension, and we want to make sure they are healthy and they are still productive, such that they can be proud to be independent and not to be the burden of the next generation. 64% live in rural areas, 3% former migrant workers, and then 55% is women, 19% primary school and below, 3% people with disability. And then last, this is only few example of the recipients of Prakerja. So Prakerja gives opportunity for all. Rio from North Sulawesi, he is unemployed at that time. He is a security officer and then got fired because of the pandemic. And then he has only high school education. He took trainings in Prakerja using internet for advertising and Adobe Photoshop. And now he is actually supervisor for 7 regions in North Sulawesi. The middle one, the current employee. So when she registered for Prakerja, she has a job, but her job as a cleaning service. But then she observed how actually journalists and teams work in the television station. And then she took training in journalism and video editing. So what happened now is that she is an operator at the master control room and to be a field journalist. And last is Yumna. I will talk more about women in technology later in the afternoon. So Yumna is a fresh graduate in IT department in a private small university in South Kalimantan. So she graduated from IT, but she does not have practical training in IT. She learned from Prakerja on web programming and also Android programming. Now she works as a programmer at a private bank. So let's discuss. This is about Prakerja. Hopefully, I can give some, idea how to implement large-scale skill development like Prakerja. But I also will come and ask for your inputs how to improve Prakerja because the orange one still 80%. So it's very big. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibu Denni. That was a very systematic, comprehensive, and very clear presentation. Fantastic. I'm very honored now to welcome the next speaker, Ms. Vivi Alatas, to give a forward-looking presentation about how to deliver inclusive lifelong learning in the digital age. Please, Madam Alatas, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. With the rapid change of today's world, it is more important than ever to become lifelong learning. By making a commitment to be a lifelong learning, anyone can stay ahead of the curve and continue to grow professionally and also personally. As Einstein said, commit yourself to lifelong learning. The most valuable asset you will ever have is your mind and what you put into it. What I learned 20 years ago in university already become obsolete unless I continue to learn. And I think it is the same thing for everyone here. But what kind of learning that we need in here? We need a learner center in inclusive lifelong learner. Lifelong learning that transform life and lift all the boats, not only creating winner-takes-all phenomena. We need a lifelong learning center that put students in the driver's seats, encouraging exploration, eureka moments of discovery, triggering what Mihai, Cek Mihai called as flow, that will create intrinsic motivation to continue to learn. We also need environment that provides support for all learners, regardless of their background, wherever they are born, whoever their parents, and recognize the unique strength and each learner brings to the table and values diversity. But of course, there are significant challenges in fostering inclusive lifelong learners. For example, inadequate internet connectivity. In some areas, or probably most areas, internet connectivity is either non-existent, unreliable, or unaffordable. Even when internets are available, the cost of devices, internet plans, and also electricity can be quite unaffordable for low-income families. But there is also another constraint, which is the lack of culturally and locally relevant content. Much of the online educational content might not be in the local language or might not be reflecting the local culture or context, making it less engaging or accessible for learners. But of course, there is also a motivational challenge. We know that a lot of people start using MOOCs, but only very small number continue until finishing all the courses that they took. And also being a poor student living in poverty often comes with high level of stress, which can impact a student's ability to focus on learning. But as Professor So already talked, and also Bu Denni already saw, there are hopes. There are various tools and technology for inclusive learning. For example, adaptive learning technology, which can help personalize learning experiences for each student based on their strengths and needs. MOOCs platforms like Coursera, edX make it possible for students in Timbuktu, in Papua, to learn from professors from Harvard or from whatever universities in the world. Assistive technology, for example, speech-to-text, screen reader, Braille ebook, making it possible for learners with disability to grow. Digital libraries such as Project Gutenberg, making it possible to have access wealth of knowledge. And also VR and AR can provide interactive and engaging learning experience. Online learning communities, which is like you have a lot of this online learning community. For example, Khan Academy not only provide instructions, but also sense of community. They can talk with each other, they can ask each other, they can persuade, they can motivate each other to learn more. And of course, there are a lot of other things like gamification, micro-learning, and others that making it more easier to have inclusive learning. But the potentials are there, but the realization of this potential requires strong efforts and strong collaborations. We need quite a number of essential policies and programs. Of course, the basic needs is infrastructure development. Ensure reliable internet and devices are available to every learner to ensure that this is not just winner-takes-all phenomena, but also programs such as digital literacy, other programs for developing digital literacy among all learners, not only just accessing internet, but also learning, distinguishing, and also using for a thinking partners, not only just for playing with social media. Teacher training is also very important, of course, to ensure provide a continuous professional development programs for integrating technology effectively. How technology becomes a sidekick of the learner and sidekick of the teacher. And of course, accessible and inclusive contents. There are a lot of contents, but mostly in English. Mostly probably more bias urban, bias education, how to make sure that the content is actually can help poor farmer in some remote areas, for example. And there is also curriculum integrations programs that's very much needed to ensure that it will enhance learning outcomes and simplify access to education. Professor So already talked about ChatGPT and AI. Of course, with the wave and ChatGPT and AI, it creates utopia and also worries. Should we be worried or should we be excited? But this combination of worried and excitement is not new. Socrates, a long, long time ago, worried that the writing device will actually ruin our memories. Queen Elizabeth I worried that the knitting device will turn worker into beggars. It didn't happen. So I'm hoping that these worries will also not happening this time. AI tutoring system, there are future prospects that Professor So already talked, that AI can help. For example, anyone with access to internet can have personal tutor without having to pay for private tutoring. AI can also be valuable tools for teachers, relieving them for administrative burdens and allowing them to focus more on teaching. But again, of course, it is not without challenge. Again, the challenge of access and equity. Not all students have the same access to technology and resources. It is important to ensure that all students have access to technology that is being used in a way that doesn't widen the achievement gaps. There is a need also to understand that there are concerns regarding, for example, the privacy, cheating, the potential for misuse of personal data. There is a need of regulation and policy to address those concerns, and also to ensure that AI technology are not monopolized by few entities. For example, I think like Singapore already started with AI governance framework. We need to understand what kind of regulation. This is, we all knew. The prospect is there, but of course, there are a lot of challenges. We also need to encourage the development of open source AI technology that can help level the playing field. More than ever, we need partnership, multi-stakeholder partnership, encouraging collaboration, partnership between government, private entities, educational institution, non-profit organization, research institution, international organization can also mitigate those challenges that we talked about before. When different stakeholders work together, they can pool resources and action and share benefits more equitably for lifelong learning. And even though we already talked, Denni and also Pak David already talked about Prakerja, but I think I would also emphasize that Prakerja is an example of serious and significant multi-partnership efforts to foster lifelong learning for all. First, for all. This is the massive reach out, 16.4 million beneficiaries from 514 cities within 2 years or 3 years, Denni. And then, of course, Inclusif, 44% of Prakerja recipients come from the poorest 40% household. 3% of beneficiaries are persons with disabilities. 3% are former migrant workers. 51% are women, and 47% are from 212 districts targeted for reducing extreme poverty. There is a need to focus on being inclusive, and I think Prakerja did a good job on that. The other one is creating ecosystem for lifelong learning. For lifelong learning to happen, learners need to get the appetite of being a learning. And Prakerja shows that 83% have never attended online or offline training before. What we hope it can create spillover effect that they will continue to learn. There is also a multi-partnership, Denni already mentioned, no less than 188 training institutions, 2 banks, 4 fintechs, 4 job portals, 8 universities, 6 digital platforms, 15 ministries, it is a lot of multi-partnership, including partnership with international agencies such as UNESCO today. And reliance on technology. This is Prakerja have the DNA to be the future programs that other programs in Indonesia, and we hope also from other countries, can also mimic. The using of reliance of technology, face recognition, verification, API checking with other data, digital complaint resolution, end-to-end digital multi-channel government-to-person payment. This is something that I hope, and I think that other people are also hoping, will also being used by other programs in Indonesia. But Prakerja is a complex program. It is impossible to make it everything is rosy, everything is okay in one shot. That's why there is a need for evidence-based policy making. Fortunately, Bu Denni and also Pak Rudi understands the need of always improving. That's why there is quite a number. I'm involved in one of the RCT evaluation, this is with Cepal Poverty Lab, and also various think tanks also do the university. But there are still a lot of things that we don't know yet. We need to learn more. And I think I'm really hoping that Prakerja will continue to push the evidence-based policy making as their main way to learn. So coming back to the question, should we be worried or should we be more hopeful? I'm more on the more hopeful side, but with caveat. Only if we have multi-partnership to ensure that the focus, the center focus is the learner, so anyone, wherever they are, can aim high, the sky is their limit. Thank you.
That was a wonderful presentation, a rapid tour. Thank you for taking us through the future, maybe, and also looking at Prakerja's impact a little bit more closely. I would now like to not waste any more time and just jump to Director Shadrach, please. You have the floor, and we look forward to hearing about how your center is looking at the inclusive use of technology in both policy and practice as part of the Commonwealth of Learning Network. Please, Director Shadrach, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to present here. And, as you mentioned, my talk is going to be more policy as well as practice. After all the speakers who enlightened us, mine is going to be almost like a recap. So special thanks to Zian Theng and Mr. Romero Edward Sitores for the support offered. On behalf of Commonwealth of Learning, I bring greetings to the policymakers, excellencies, experts, and delegates who are gathered in Bali to deliberate upon the concept of inclusive lifelong learning. And I'm sure the Bali Manifesto will be a document to refer to for a long time to come. I shall be speaking to the theme offered to me, and the theme of the plenary has 5 words. Next slide, please. The learning is the first word. The concept of learning needs to be situated in the future of work and workplaces. While we recognize the domains of learning, as pronounced by Benjamin Bloom, in terms of cognitive, psychomotor, and affective, which refers to application of mind, body, and heart, we need to contextualize learning in the modern day. Globalization, fourth industrial revolution, demographic shifts, climate change, digital technologies all influence the way we conduct our business, organize ourselves, and prepare for the future. And that's one of the reasons ALE, the adult learning and education, happens to be the subject of discussion. When it comes to preparing the future workforce, future generation that will sustain this world, we need to recognize that the learning styles are very different. Their learning approaches are different. Their ability to learn in the digital era is compounded by the abundance of information, availability of learning technologies, the need for multiple literacies, accessibility to content, and rationale for need-based and choice-based learning. While the factors as referred to, the socioeconomic conditions, psychological factors, geographical location, language, culture, the generic cognitive factors affect, we need to really recognize that learning happens in different ways: workplace learning, action learning, project-based learning, problem-based learning, collaborative learning, learning together with machine, and combining both human and artificial intelligence are the norms of today. So the question is, how do we locate learning in the new paradigm? When it comes to lifelong learning, the concept is self-driven, continual knowledge and skills-driven pursuance, and this never ends. When learning stops, life stops, not the other way around. When life stops, learning stops. Lifelong learning also converges the idea of traditional learning, traditional education, to the idea of modern learning opportunities. Now, lifelong learning makes the case for continuous skilling. It goes beyond the idea of behavioralism to constructivism and collectivism, be it in research, work, or innovation. So the questions that face the policy makers and the entire world is, can brick and mortar institutions alone cater to lifelong learning, or are the open, online, distance, digital, blended learning systems the new normal to the new paradigm? And how do we embed 21st century skills, soft skills, vocational skills, and life skills in our learning program on and above the degree programs that we offer? And should lifelong learning also embrace the long-term degree programs, or also now look at the need-based, choice-based micro-credentials that would put people in just-in-time training so that they can be employed? The third aspect is inclusive lifelong learning, a concept very close to organizations like UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning, Commonwealth of Learning, and various governments. How do we include the excluded? The question of including the marginalized, women, illiterate population, people in remote locations, persons with disability, persons with learning disability, etc., also beg us to answer these questions as to how, due to automation and greening and other transition that happen, millions are in the verge of losing jobs, millions require reskilled, millions of our workforce require upskilling, and our young people are to be prepared for the new world. So what is the new social contract for education? How do we make lifelong learning a human right? And if we declare so, what does it mean for governments and stakeholders? Now, the fourth term in the topic is digital revolution, and there is a lot spoken about artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, the talk of the town, ChatGPT, and generative AI. And the first speaker, Professor, also mentioned about immersive technologies like XR and augmented realities, virtual realities, and so on. But, do we recall the days of COVID when we switched to emergency teaching? Now, COVID is gone. Is business as usual in our public sector education? Or are we embracing technology-enabled learning, rather AI-enabled learning today, or AI-enabled support services, AI-enabled assessments? So the question arises is, where is the classroom in the context of anytime, anywhere school? Where is the teacher in the context of AI tutor and AI teaching assistants? And where is the student? Is the student visible or invisible, face-to-face or remote? And more than anything, how does the learner learn in the new AI-assisted world is something that the digital revolution asks us to question. Now, when it comes to the implications, the question is, are we prepared? Can we do it alone? And whose responsibility is it? Is funding for education and skilling a state's responsibility, or should we shift it to the industry? Or should the preparing the future workforce, global citizens, lifelong learners, and others are solely with a particular authority? Who is responsible for holistic education, value-based education, outcome-based education? Or is it all self-organized learning environment that takes over, the AI world that takes over? I think the policy steer is all about inclusive lifelong learning, flexible learning for pathways. Somebody mentioned about high flux learning, mobilities across disciplines, mobilities across geographies, and mobility across occupations, and offering the control to the learner rather than somebody else for the choice-based and need-based education. Next slide, please. I just wanted to quote an interesting definition that defines the inclusive lifelong learning from UNESCO itself. And many of you are familiar with this quotation. Next slide, please. I want to end my presentation by highlighting two of the recent efforts of Commonwealth of Learning and SEMCA. And this research is among 5,008 visually impaired people in almost all the provinces of India using a very robust surveying methodology involving both women and men, girls and boys, unemployed and employed, and also those who are in active learning and the NEET, the not in education, employment or training. And this research reveals something. It reveals that open and distance digital learning is the most effective and inclusive method of learning. And ODL is the first choice for many of them rather than bringing them second chance education. Interestingly, the privatization of education and skilling hasn't done enough to include the excluded. It is the state that continues to support the persons with disability, but the state is unable to address a plethora of issues, whether there is the access to technology, access to assistive technologies, the digital books, braille books, and so on. It's all falling on the public system, so to say. There is a new need for a new paradigm or a renewed social contract for skilling and lifelong learning, inclusive lifelong learning. And this is something that we need to take note of. Next slide, please. The next example I want to provide was this second effort during the pandemic, partnering with Coursera, but now through a sustained partnership working with Google, Udemy, Coursera, and many others, Commonwealth of Learning engineered a workforce recovery initiative under its Open Door initiative, where the doors of learning were kept open during the pandemic. And this workforce recovery initiative was a solace to over 150,000 young people who learned something new. Through this initiative, they learned how to self-learn, they learned how to take responsibility for their own learning, they learned how to manage their time, they learned to determine a career path, they learned to ensure that their learning results in acquiring new skills and knowledge and find newer opportunities. Our independent research on the efficacy of this program identified that job-oriented micro-credentials that provide just-in-time learning to make people employable is something very, very important. And in this program itself, which only cost us $200,000 for 150,000 people in 56 countries of the Commonwealth. Actively 40 countries participated. Just imagine, under $2, we were able to, within a period during the pandemic, turn 40% of them from access to success rate, and 80% of them reported positive impact on their confidence level, promotion in companies if they were already employed, finding new jobs, or ability to change the career pathway. Interestingly, 80% of them were first-time online learners who actually navigated, and we provided a strong help desk. And in fact, the majority of cost was for providing a strong help desk, which we are turning into AI-enabled help desk today. And while learners reported positive change, we also spoke to the employers to find out that the employees find these people with right skills and attitude to learnability and to become lifelong learners, which is the mantra for success for the future. Next slide, please. Now the question is, how do policies and programs at the local, national, and international level support learner-centered, inclusive digital education content, platforms, and teaching approaches? One way to do this would be like the mega project that our Indonesian colleagues were mentioning. The other way to do it would be, in addition to what we do in Prakerja and other initiatives, could we also align with the existing other platforms and initiatives, such as the one that we did at Commonwealth of Learning, and also bring in the excluded into the realm, so that 1,000 flowers can bloom rather than centralizing everything. It's a question to be answered. But that said, what do we learn from the worlds of Udemy's, Coursera's, and Khan Academies, who are actually providing Khan Migo, for example, an AI tutor and AI teaching assistant for every teacher, or AI tutor for millions of learners in their program. And the question is, do we compete with them or collaborate with them? The examples cited in the Commonwealth of Learning's, two examples catering to the visually impaired, begs for multi-stakeholder convergence. The example of called Coursera Workforce Recovery Program enabled governments in various nations, including small island nations such as, say, Guyana, where every 10th individual on that island nation was a learner of called Coursera Work Recovery Program. A stunning example of how private, public, and local organizations can deliver. So the question remains, why are multi-stakeholder partnerships essential for inclusive lifelong learning in the era of digital and technological change? I think we need to take cognizance of the multi-stakeholder partnership and the essential need for bringing them together. And I think this was well articulated in Prakerja. And not only bringing them together, but how do we sustain and make it effective? And how can we build finally a digital learning public infrastructure so that everyone can ride on the network? So can the role of the government be just building that digital learning public infrastructure so that everyone could come and ride on it? Other words, I'm talking about an online open network of digital learning. Can that happen? Can every government be responsible for the same? Next slide, please. So, I wanted to end my presentation by simply once again, putting out UNESCO's lifelong learning definition. But that said, the question of multi-stakeholder partnership in education and skilling is something that we need to think through, and what the role that the governments play, what role that the intermediate organizations can play, what role that the delivery institutions can play is something that we need to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Director Shadrach. And we have now reached the end of the presentations. We actually had, we were scheduled to have an online speaker from Brazil, joining us from Brazil, but due to technical problems, he was unable to make it, and he was going to present on a private sector perspective of how technology is used to support those who are hearing impaired. And it's AI-driven animations that complement or can translate through sign language what is seen on the screens. So I would recommend you to Google perhaps Hand Talk Brazil, Hand Talk, to find out more. It's very unfortunate that we could not have him join us. In the interest of time, we will not have a Q&A, but I would just like to summarize or talk about 3 points that resonated with me. I think the first point is that the issue of inclusion is more than a buzzword. We saw from Professor So's presentation that when you actually look at who are the target groups or beneficiaries of research, it's somewhat concerning that emerging technologies generally seem to not focus on learners with disabilities, older persons, marginalized or groups or minorities. But at the same time, there's a lot of potential that can be offered due to, that technology can offer to offer better opportunities and also better outcomes both in terms of learning, both in terms of employment generation. And then when we moved on to Ibu Denni's presentation, what we saw was a very clear step-by-step and intentional progression from policy to practice, and looking at those who are vulnerable, attempting to span the vast archipelago of Indonesia. And then when we heard from Ibu Vivi, it was very much looking at how we need to balance both the potential and the risks, and to bear in mind that existing inequalities are clear, like access, connectivity, educators' capacities, learner skills, and also the content, the language, and the diversity and relevance of the content. And just finally, I think what resonated in terms of what Director Shadrach mentioned is this question of multi-stakeholder partnership and how it's actionable is actually very complex. And in this day and age, talking from UIL's point of view, no one can do it alone. I don't think this problem is something for inclusive lifelong learning is something that is one person's responsibility. Governments are major players and major partners, but we all have the agency to contribute to how technology can be developed in an inclusive way so that we hopefully have more just, peaceful, and sustainable societies. So thank you very much. And I will now hand over the floor to the Master of Ceremonies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Moderator Tang. Thank you. Let's give our round of applause. And of course, we do have a group photo together. So please stand. And we have our online speaker as well. Yes, let's step to the front. Thank you. Let's take a group photo. We go 3, 2, 1, Bali. Yes. Let's give a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you so much for such a thought-provoking session. Please return to your seats. Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, and to all our speakers. We have truly enjoyed this panel, and we are ready for our lunch break. But before that, there are 3 things. Ladies and gentlemen, there are 3 things. So first, we will return to this ballroom at 1:30 and continue on the series of activities of the Inclusive Lifelong Learning Conference. And then tonight, the gala dinner starts at 7 p.m. at the Grand Ballroom, which is exactly where we're having our luncheon later on. Thirdly, tomorrow we commence at 9 a.m. Very simple. Now we will have a Wi-Fi. You know, selfie is for a selfie, so Wi-Fi is for the entire room to smile to our cameraman and videographer. So, get ready. Yes, yes, put on your lipstick, that's right. Just kidding. This is the Bali vibe, ladies and gentlemen. Smile to our cameraman. This is called a Wi-Fi. Cameraman and videographer, give a wave. Yes, you're in Bali, that's right. This is Inclusive Lifelong Learning Conference here in Bali, 3rd till the 6th of July, 2023. One more time. Yes, our videographer is ready. 3, 2, 1. Everybody say Bali. Excellent. Give yourself a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Gilda. I bid you a fond farewell. We will meet again tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Once again, number 1, please return to this venue at 1:30 p.m. And then we will have our workshops parallel in Karangasem Ballroom, this ballroom, Negara Room, and Badung Room. Dinner tonight is at 7 p.m. and tomorrow I'll see you 9 a.m. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti Om. Thank you.